Happy Sunday! This Storytime Sunday. I know. I look forward to this. And it's been a while since we looked at Exordium. But before we start, and before I give you summary of 83% of a book, which is going to be fun, I like to announce I no longer have COVID. Yay! And I shouldn't have to mute today for gross nose noises. Hopefully. Yeah, my sniffles are all but gone, which is wonderful. Wonderful stuff. My eyes going funny again. There are some days where the technology I have just does not want to do the thing. However, we're going to ignore that. We're going to carry on because who cares? Anyway, good things. I finished some books. I read some things. I think I cancelled that too quickly, but oh well. There's this one. I read the book 14, Magical Girl Raising Project, and I decided that these are going to be like mini reviews, so I'm going to talk about a little bit more than I usually would with the like minute and a half of what I was doing. So they've done something a little, Yen Press has done something a little bit weird with releasing Breakdown as the 14th Magical Girl Raising Project book. The last one was Magical Girl Raising Project Black, which was continued with the Japan releases in Magical Girl Raising Project White, which should have been the next book. But for some reason, we've gone on to Breakdown, which is a separate story, separate girls. There's a lot of returning faces from other books, but it's not the continuation of the story, which actually slowed me down reading. I normally eat Magical Girl Raising Project books for breakfast. It normally takes me a few days to get through them, but this one is not only the biggest Magical Girl Raising Project book I've read so far, but it was also a little bit of a disappointment that I don't get any answers after the last book. However, it is still a very good Magical Girl Raising Project book. Once you get past that disappointment, we've got there's this lovely powder keg of a situation it's managed to create with a limited resource they're fighting over, and good fun stuff like that. Very good excuses for magical girl murder. It's good stuff. And it is not the only thing I've read. Wait, I'm gonna update my number before I do this. Oh, no, I didn't mean to do that. Buttons, bro. My book count. So we're down to... yeah! The second book I read is technically a manga, but I'm counting it, okay? There's so many books I need to read, and manga is just a book with pictures. I picked up The Abandoned Princess when I went out wanting to Christmas shop. I do get let out sometimes to do life things because I begged the guardian of the Forbidden Library that I at least wanted to get my family Christmas presents, but then I didn't get anyone Christmas presents, and I bought myself £70 worth of tea and manga instead. And this was one of the mangas. I say manga, I think I looked up, it's not a webtoons, this was on Happy Comics or something like that. But it's fully coloured, it was very pretty, it's quite dark at the start. I didn't expect how dark it was going to be. But it turns into a kind of second chance story about a young girl who was raised to be empress because everyone thought she was prophesized to, but then another girl shows up just as she's getting old enough to marry, and apparently she's actually the prophesized one, so she gets all abandoned and treated badly, and eventually gets murdered because she got mad and tried to murder the emperor because of how shitty she was being treated. And then she woke up as a 10-year-old and she gets to try and redo everything. So far it's been really good. I actually saw the second book today and I was like, oh, I kind of want it, should I get it? But I haven't gotten it because I've got some other manga to read first. No more manga until I've read what I've already got. I don't like buying things for my to-read list that I don't intend to read. So I have to get through what I've got before I can buy any more. Anyway, yeah, this one's really good. Very, very pretty. I'm always attracted to pretty white-haired characters, so that's why I picked this up. It was just a very pretty cover. You can't see it, but there's like foil shiny on there as well. Oh, it's very good. Very good. Right. Enough of me ranting about books I've read. Oh, I can take my book count down now. Book count down to 9,991. My 10th book is looking to be Exordium at this point. Because we are at 83% of this book. Which probably means, depending on how much we get through today, there's only 1 or 2 streams until we finish it. Until we see the end of the start of Zook and Nox's adventure. I do not have permission to read the sequels, just so you know. You will have to go buy them yourself. Just as you should buy this one, because it'd be weird to only buy the second one. So you should buy the first one as well. Just because you should own a series if you're going to buy a series. It's important. Links in the description. Anyway, let me try summon. I'm not summoning the book, we already have it here. Summarize 83% of a book. Okie dokie. Summary begins. Chapter 1. Chapter 1 started with a guy going into some really spooky, scary ruins because he's desperate for something to sell, desperate for money, because he's poor and he needs it. In there, he finds some weird magical item, tries to run away with it. It'll set him up for life if he can manage to sell it, but no, he gets shanked by a Draugia and dies. Woo! Then we get introduced to our main character, Nox, who is in the same situation as the guy at the start. Really, he's been diving through dungeons, trying to get metal and anything of value to sell, not only for his survival, but also because his mother is sick and needs medicine. He is running out of options though. He's basically, all his usual haunts are running dry, and so he goes to the local tavern, see if he can hear any rumours or anything he can get a job or anything like that. And he overhears a group of adventurers talking about braving this forbidden, dangerous dungeon that the guy did at the start. So he joins them on it because he guesses, well, there should be loot in there, and if I'm with a group, it's not quite as suicidal as it appears. I mean, it is suicidal. So off they go, grand adventure time. They get to said dungeon, and they can't get anything because everything they touch just dissolves into dust. It's so old down there. Nothing has withstood the test of time except for that one little magical item that seems to be calling to Nox as he goes down there, to the point he can find it without like really knowing what he's trying to find. So he takes the item and they all turn to try find some more loot because obviously he's got that. And the others need to get some cash. But then the Draugia appear, because they were murdering the other guy for trying to take this magical item. They tried to murder the party as well. Smartly, he does try to get rid of the magical item. He doesn't just keep it. He realizes that's what they're after and tries to get rid of it, only for it to get stuck to his hand because the MacGuffin said no. And he splits off from the party, so the adventurers get away, and Nox is on his own. He fights the Draugia best he can, only to get thrown down a ravine. When he wakes up, he is in spiderwebs. They're not too fresh, luckily, and there's no sign of a spider just yet. So he cuts himself out of the webs and tries to carry on. He's low on water, low on food. Things are really bad. He gets to a stairs up, which is great. Up is the direction he needs to go to get out. But, there's more spider webs. So the spiders come, they poison him and wrap him up in webs and all that good stuff. And then he, in some ditch effort to help himself, asks this magical item, the clavis, to save him. And which it does. It explodes. It burns all the spiders, kills them all, frees him, and then turns into a ring and a magical talking fox called Zyuk. Zyuk says he's from the stars and he got bound to whoever wears the ring, which is now Nox. As much as he's tried to get rid of it, it won't leave him. MacGuffin says no. And Zyuk wants to find out what their purpose is. Why was Nox chosen by this magical item, and what is his purpose in helping him? What does he need to help him with? So the two of them travel through the Forbidden Dungeon place. I can't remember the name. They encounter the Draugr a few times. They have a lot of chats about filling in Zyuk on the fact that magic is forbidden. It is forbidden. The Holy Knights will just come and kill you, or torture you, or both. Not necessarily in that order. If you're found with magic, or suspected of knowing magic, or knowing anything to do with magic, the only people who are allowed are some of the Holy Knights. Because the king feels that magic is to blame for the gods abandoning this world. They think that if people stop using magic, that their gods will return and life will return to this world, because everyone's kind of noticed that life is kind of disappearing. People aren't having as many kids, people are dying a lot quicker. It's just generally a little bleak in the world at the moment. So eventually, after much desperation, after falling into rivers, down a waterfall, and terrible, terrible things, they do eventually see sunlight and find their way out. Still chased by Draugr at this point. They rushed out a field and then across a flowing river, which the Draugr basically melt into. We have rules, it seems, of dark magic being washed away by flowing rivers in this world, which is wonderful. So, but Zyuk is injured, and the two of them are pretty much set on splitting off at this point, because Zyuk wants to find out what's going on with this world and what their purpose is, whereas our boy Nox just wants to go home and make sure his mummy is okay. That is all he wants. He is very dead set on that. So they travel a little bit more, they manage to get some fish, they manage to sleep and rest and generally feel a little bit nicer now they're out of the scary Forbidden Ruins and there aren't undead soldiers coming after them. Until they are attacked by a werewolf-like thing in a forest. They think they're screwed for a minute, but they're saved by a bunch of orcs. Very nice orcs. Nox doesn't really believe that they're nice. He's spent a lot of time with what seems to be the king's propaganda, telling them the orcs are evil and all that good stuff. But the orcs are literally nothing but nice to them. They are the nicest people we have met in this book so far. They look after them, they guard while they have a nice sleep, they share their meal with them, and even often to take them back to their village, where there's a shaman that might be able to help them figure out what the hell's going on with the magic items and why they're here. Also give them some supplies to carry on with their journey. I should mention that this group of orcs was supposed to be scouting for a next place for their village/camp to get to, because there's very few of them left. And they are also being hunted by the Holy Knights because their shamans still use magic. It's part of their culture. And they don't want to give that up. So they've been wandering and stuff until they can find a place to properly settle down where it's safe. So they go to the village. I can't remember what the shaman told them, to be honest. I don't think it was anything too important. I think the shaman filled them in on the gods potentially not coming back, and had obviously being the king's excuse to hunt down magic and things like that. They get settled at the village for a little bit, and Nox gets a little bit worried, a little bit antsy. He wants to leave Zyuk with them, because then Zyuk won't be alone in his journey, at least at the start, and he'll be able to go on and do things, and Nox is fine by himself. So he actually leaves the camp without anyone noticing, only to climb up a hill and see the Holy Knights on the way. So shit. He runs back full speed, warns the camp, and they give him a pack and Zyuk a pack and just go, because there's no time for anything else. They just have to leave Their very small group of warriors go to engage the Holy Knights, and their civilians start to pack up everything they can and run, because that's all they can do. Then the Holy Knights comes back and just starts to decimate the place. And that's about where we were at. Nox and Zook had made it out, and they were ready to go on the next leg of their journey. After this, I know, so sad. I nearly cried. It was awful. Here we go. Let's hope it gets a little bit better. The morning sky was a gradient of reds and blues as the pair finally came to a stop. They'd walked all night in an attempt to put as much distance between themselves and the knights as possible. The entire journey had been filled with silent grief for everyone they'd left behind. Yeah. There was little doubt that any who were left in the village had been slaughtered. Those that managed to escape would probably be pursued and cut down as well. But there was little they could do to help the orcs. Even if they stood and fought, it would have sealed their own demise at the hands of the knights. Nox collapsed at the edge of a small stream that wound its way through the plains. Lifting Zook from his shoulders, he set the fox on the ground, allowing him to stretch after being wrapped about Nox's neck for the past 10 hours. Oh, that's a long time. Anyone would be stiff. Zook got hurt escaping the Draugia and still hasn't managed to quite recover, because it was a very bad hurt. Zook limped over to the stream, bending his head down to drink. Nox followed suit, before he dipped a spare bit of cloth into the water and wiped away the sweat that gathered under Zook's fur on his brow. And on his brow. He was exhausted. Pushing himself back to his feet, Nox took a good look at his surroundings. There was finally enough light to gather his senses and figure out where they were. From the mountains he'd walked due east, heading in the general direction of Kald. In the dark, there hadn't been much to go on. Now, with the soldiers hopefully far behind them, he wanted to take a moment to figure out where they were. Leaving Zook by the river, he climbed to the top of a small knoll to get his bearings. The sky was blushing red at the horizon. Dawn was only a few minutes away, but the two moons still hung in the sky, the smaller one finally losing the tiniest sliver of its fullness, while the other was nearly down to half. As he turned on the spot, looking over the plains, his eyes caught shapes on the horizon, on the northeast horizon. Even at a distance, he recognized the high walls and tall buildings on the eastern side. It was Kald, and they were in luck. The city looked to be no more than a day away. This is so dangerous, I have to go back! Nox knew he could make it by nightfall if they didn't sleep. He was going to see his mother soon. The sound of voices caught Nox's ear, and he spun around, looking back towards the mountain. To his horror, he saw a band of soldiers led by a heavily armoured knight. Nox ducked down immediately, flattening himself on the grass. But he heard the shouts as he'd been spotted. He darted over to the edge of the hill, ready to call out Zook that they were in danger. He skidded to a halt as he saw a large black creature sneaking through the grass behind the fox, who was sitting at the edge of the stream, oblivious that he was moments away from being killed. There was a jagged cut down one side of the creature, and an arrow shaft sticking out on one leg, the fletching the same as those used by the orcs. It was Belding, and it had followed them through the night and across the mountains. Nox didn't take time to think about what the soldiers would do when they arrived. Instead, he cried out to get the Belding's attention and ran down the hill, pulling his spear from his shoulder. The creature whipped its head around and roared in Nox's direction, alerting Zyuk to its presence. Nox didn't give it a chance to attack first. He rushed the creature, bashing it across the skull with the shaft of his spear. The beast yelped in surprise, taking a few steps back, shaking its head. Its lips curled back as it glared back up at Nox, the ears flattened against its head. A deep rumble sounded in its throat as it sprung forward on its hind legs. The long black claws ready to strike, but it suddenly stopped a few feet away from Nox, a look of confusion on its face. It lifted its arm, and there was Zyuk, his teeth buried into the fur and flesh. He growled, holding on to the Belding as if his life depended on it. The creature ducked its head down to investigate. It's moving my camera slightly. I thought maybe that'll help with the eye twitching. Twitch, 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 twitch. The creature ducked its head down to investigate, sniffing and growling as the fox dug in further. Taking it. Okay, I lied. There might still be some sniffles. I swear it's just when I talk a lot. Like, I don't normally talk a lot in my day-to-day life. At least not like this. Not like stream talk. Oh well. I'm sure it'll go away eventually. Taking his chance with the distraction, Nox lunged, burying the spearhead into the shoulder of the creature. It screamed into the cold, early morning air, a cloud of fog billowing from its mouth. The cries echoed across the plains, and Nox knew the soldiers heard it. If not all of Kald. He yanked the spear back out and stood his ground. With a forceful yank, the Belding ripped Zyuk from his arm, tossing him a few feet into the nearby grass, where he landed with a yelp on you, Zyuk. Dripping blood from his shoulder and forearm, the Belding turned on Nox, snarling through its needle-like teeth. Nox took a step forward. Zyuk stepped toward Nyuk. Nox took a step towards Zyuk, wanting to run to his aid, but the Belding rushed him. His arm swung outward, catching Nox in the ribs and pulling him from his feet, breaking the claws across his skin. He sailed through the air, crashing down onto the stony shore of the river. His spear was knocked from his grasp, landing with a splash in the water. Trying to force air back into his body, Nox made a grab for it, but he felt a sudden weight on top of him, holding his arms down. Saliva dribbled down onto his exposed neck and shoulders as the creature leaned closer, a deep growl rumbling in its throat. Nox watched with a sinking feeling as the spear was caught by the current of the river and floated away, taking all his hopes of survival with it. He turned back to the Belding, whose claws were digging into his arms. His ribs burned with pain from where he'd been struck, and he felt the hot wet of blood seeping into his clothing. They stared at one another for a long moment, the yellow, human-like eyes of the Belding unsettling to Nox his core. Settling Nox to his core. Yes. He could hear the sounds of hooves and shouts not far off, but he knew the knights wouldn't get there in time, as he watched the Belding open his toothy maw. A calm came over him as he accepted his fate. He'd failed Nulak and his mother, breaking the promises he'd made to them. Unwilling to break eye contact, Nox watched as the building lowered its jaw, the teeth pressing around his neck as the first light of dawn spilled over the hill and across his fur. It stopped. Nox felt a strange pulse through the creature as it pulled back, its weight against his chest suddenly less. Glancing up into the monster's eyes, he saw they were no longer yellow, but green with a ring of brown around the irises. The growl lessened into more of a whine with a voice-like quality. Pushing away, the building backed up, crying out as it crouched down in the grass. Its hands pressed against its skull, like it was in unbearable pain. Nox pushed himself up to his elbows, watching as the form began to shift and contort. The fur was falling out in great tufts along with the needle-pointed teeth that clattered to the ground. Claws disintegrated and the muzzle cracked, shrinking back towards the creature's face. It howled in pain as bones snapped into different places, breaking themselves and reconnecting in a new formation. Slowly the black fur gave way to pink flesh, and the body reconfigured itself into a shape more recognizable. Nox took the moment of his distraction to get back to his feet, pulling his trusty dagger from his belt. He stumbled forward, lifting the knife to strike a fatal blow to the monster that had nearly killed him twice. He stopped short as he heard sobs emanating from the now naked thing curled up on the ground in front of him. The body was bloody and covered in dirt and scars. The wounds from the previous night were still fresh, but sealed over, while the shoulders still bled freely from Nox's spear. The creature looked up at Nox, through its hands and gasped, pushing itself away through the grass. For the first time, Nox got a good look at its face and realized it was a man. I knew it was a werewolf. Fool me. A thick mat of oily black hair hung around his face. His face was hard-edged and square, with a large scar running across his cheek and over his jaw. The green eyes that looked up at Nox in fear as they backed away, hugging his knees tightly to his chest. Please, he shuddered. Please don't kill me. Nox was so taken aback by what he saw, he didn't hear the footsteps rushing up behind him. Before he had a chance to react, he felt the dagger knocked from his hand, strong arms forcing him to his knees. His arms were yanked painfully behind his back. Other soldiers fell on the nude man in front of him, grinding him into the dirt mercilessly, ignoring his cries of pain. Nox could hear his heart pounding in his ears as he looked around, trying to struggle out of the grasp of the soldiers. Zyuk was nowhere to be seen, thankfully, but that only gave him more reason to worry. However, instead of the blood-red cloaks he expected, he noticed the soldiers were all dressed in leather armor. Most were equipped with a short sword and a dagger. The crest of Kald was emblazoned on their chests, signifying their position within the city guard. For a brief second, he felt almost thankful that they were only guards, until he heard a familiar voice. "What's all this?" The man walked around in front of Nox, his blood-red cape swirling behind him as the armor plates clanged together. It looked like Captain Ragvir had been part of the battalion that stormed the orc village. Nox tried to keep his eyes down, finally realizing the true amount of trouble he was in. "Who are you, boy?" Ragbear barked. "What are you doing out here?" Scrounger, sir," Nox replied automatically. "Just heading home." The captain pointed to the dirty, naked man covered in blood. "And that?" I... Nox faltered. He couldn't think of anything to say besides the truth. "I don't know. He was a monster just a moment ago. Was fighting to stay alive." We'll see about that." The captain stalked over to the nude man. "Is what he says true? You some kind of monster?" Please don't kill me," the man sobbed. "Please don't kill me." The captain gave him a hard kick in the ribs. "Answer me!" A cry of pain escaped his lips, but his sobs grew worse, making his words completely unintelligible. The captain scoffed, kicking dirt at the man before he turned back to the rest of them. "Search the area! Every blade of grass! They're hiding something." Nox stayed silent as the soldiers who weren't busy keeping him and the transformed Belvin down split off into groups, scanning over the area. He tried to keep his gaze fixed on the ground, hoping that none of them would find Zook. He didn't know if the fox had escaped, been further injured, or worse. But he knew neither of them would stand a chance if he was found. He clenched his eyes shut, listening to the sound of his own heartbeat pounding as the seconds ticked by. "You know what I think?" The captain began, standing between them, his fingers laced behind his back. "I think I've decided you're a problem. I'm not sure why yet." Nox shook his head. "No, sir!" "Shut the fuck up!" Ragbear hissed. "Nobody here asked you what you think." "Captain!" one of the guards called, jogging over. "We found a dead fox by the river." "He's not dead, he's 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 not dead. Lies." Nox felt his heart stop in his chest. "And this bag." The guard leaned close, whispering, "It looks like it's of orcish make." "I can see that, you fool," Ragbear barked. "Anything else?" "Just this dagger he had," the guard replied sheepishly, handing it over, shrinking away. "Fine. Go stand somewhere until I need you." "Yes, sir!" "I was right," the captain said with a grin, holding up the bag so Nox could see it. "It looks like you are a problem, piece of shit orc sympathizer, huh?" I found it," Nox said, mentally kicking himself as soon as the words came out of his mouth. He was still reeling from the news about Zook, which is a lie! "Right, I'm sure you did." The captain began to rifle through the bag, pouring the contents on the ground. He kicked the food and water skin away before he paused, cocking his head to the side in confusion. Stooping down, he picked up the crystal and turned it over in his hands. "Interesting," was all he said. He put it off to the side, pushing through the rest of the contents. Almost all of it he threw away. Nox tensed up when he reached for the scrolls, and the captain's eyes were instantly on him. "Don't want me to look at this, huh?" he said, waving it in the air. "You're really making this too easy. I prefer a challenge." He turned the scrolls over and pulled them open, staring down at the pages covered in strange runes. His expression stiffened to one of surprise and confusion as he scanned over their contents. Nox could barely breathe, as anxiety and fear in his chest threatened to consume him completely. As the captain flipped the last page, his face broke into a wide smile. My, he sighed, looking down at Nox. "This is my lucky day. I spent all night killing orcs just to be rewarded with a mage in the morning. How the stars have aligned. Where did you go?" The sound of hooves interrupted him as he looked up, suddenly straightening himself. "What is it?" a deep male voice asked from behind Nox. Nox knew only one person who could make Ragvir act like that. Was one of higher station. He thought back to the night before, looking down at the village as a mounted figure blew the huts to pieces with magic. It could only be one of the primes. "It looks like a possible mage, Prime Ebran? The captain replied, his posture stiff. "He has some strange papers on him, possibly from the Hollow. Let me see those." The captain walked over, handing the paperwork up to the unseen man. They were both silent for a long moment, before Nox heard the shifting of metal armor and a thud on the ground. Footsteps followed, moving around his person. He kept his head tilted downwards, trying not to look up, afraid he'd make it worse by how frightened he knew he was. Armored boots came into his line of sight, standing only a foot or two in front of him. "Where did you find these papers, boy? Boy. Dad, boy." The Hollow, sir," Nox wavered. "I was bringing them back to turn over to the captain." He lied. "They seem strange." "This is powerful arcane spellwork, the likes of which has never been found by someone like you. Did you have help?" "No, sir." "Do you practice the arcane?" "No, sir." "Are you lying?" "No, sir." He hummed, turning to the side. "Captain, hand me that dagger." There was a shuffling of boots, then silence. "Look at me, boy." Nox felt his head ripped back, one of the guards grabbing a handful of hair. His eyes fell on the cloaked and armoured figure in front of him. The armour was well made and gave the man a hulking appearance, as if every inch of his body was made of muscle. A blood-red mass covered most of his face, and an exquisitely crafted steel helmet sat upon his head, metallic horns curling back from his temples. All Nox could see was the piercing blue eyes of the opposing man in front of him. "I have practiced the arcane for many years, trained by the leader of the Holy Knights himself to fulfill their noble quest to save this world. Do you know who we are trying to save it from? He leaned down, waiting for Nox to answer. People like you, he said after a moment. Not only are you a liar, but a bad one at that. The only one true God cannot lead the people of Reala to glory if your kind are allowed to persist. So mean. A blinding flash of pain erupted through Nox's body as he cried out, his voice echoing off the hills. He watched as Prime Ilbran pulled a dagger from his upper thigh. Blood pooled around the wound, running down his leg and dripping into the grass. For example, this dagger you carry, he said, holding up in hand. It's simple. It's a simple enchantment that keeps the blade clean. Not something just any fool would be carrying around. Oh no, we knew it was special, but poor Noxie. You didn't even know he was using magic the whole goddamn time. Nox watched as the blood ran down the blade in rivulets. After a few seconds, it began to disappear on its own, turning into a fine mist that was blown away by the breeze. In a matter of seconds, the dagger was completely clean, shiny and dry once more, as if it had been forged that very morning. Not only that, the Prime continued, but you also carry something else that is much more powerful. He handed the scrolls to Ragvir and leant close. Taking Nox's left hand, he turned it over to get a better look at the ring. Actually, you led us right to the orcs with this thing. It's how we found you. Something this powerful is easy to track for those of us who are trained in the arcane. It's practically a beacon for anyone with enough sense to pay attention. Prime Ilbran ran his thumb over the ring, causing it to glow softly. Then he grasped a hold of it and gave a sudden pull. With a sudden crack of lightning, he was blown backwards off his feet, splashing into the river. The guards holding Nox were also affected and fell to the ground, writhing in pain as electricity arced over their bodies. Nox was too stunned to move, as Captain Ragvir and several others ran to the Prime's aid. "Get the fuck off me, you fools!" he snarled, pushing himself out of the water. He stumped back over to Nox, water streaming down his cloak and from between the metal plates. Oh, good lord, that must be so heavy. Grabbing Nox by the throat, he lifted him off his feet. "You think you're funny, don't you? You think you have even a sliver of a chance against me?" Until he squeezed Nox's neck hard, until his vision began to blur, and he could hear cracking as the back of his neck. Cracking at the back of his neck, that is bad. "It would be so easy, you know. Killing you is like a fly to me. Nothing." Nox felt his consciousness falling away. "But not yet. No, no, no." He pulled Nox close, his face only inches away. "I think you need to pay for that little stunt you just pulled. And I know the captain is especially gifted in that department." Suddenly, Nox felt himself thrown to the ground without enough lucidity to catch himself. He hit the earth hard, forcing all the air from his lungs. "Tie them up and take them back to Cald," Prime Ilbran shouted. "Captain, I want that ring and anything else of value they possess in 2 days before I leave. Do whatever it takes." "Yes, sir," the captain replied, still clutching the scrolls. Nox was too hazy to struggle as he was tied up and hefted off the ground. hefted off the ground along with the naked man. Together they were tossed over the backs of the pair of horses and lashed to the saddles like baggage. Zook was lying somewhere in the grass, dead. Not dead! Outside of Nox's sight. All of his worst fears had come true. The orc village had been destroyed. Because of him. Zook was dead. He'd never make it home. As the world continued to darken, his vision tunneling in around him, all he could think of was his sick mother and how he'd never see her again. Yeah, bye. Drop my glasses. Nah. That's so... Nah, it's not good. I knew that he was screwed as soon as the knights caught up with him, but how are we getting out of this one? Is he gonna get the scrolls back and be able to teleport or something? Because there's a teleport spell on those scrolls. But we just don't know where it teleports to. It could be something worse. We don't know. Will we ever see Jaeger the Dwarf again? That is another big question I need the answer to. And maybe we will find out in the next chapter. But first I need to quickly update that current chapter reading business. Chapter 24. I'd also like to tell you, let me show you. We actually only have, with this chapter, 1, 2, 3, 4 more chapters to read this book. Only 4. So, we're gonna get through this one, and then, I don't know, we'll see what time it is, see if we can get through another one, and then we won't, there'll be only one more stream of this afterwards, I think, because, like, there's only 4 more chapters. I'm gonna have to talk to the next author and get things sorted. I've got a few lined up, but I will have to start sending some emails after this stream, I think. Anyway, chapter 24. When Nox woke, he didn't know where he was. His vision was still blurry and everything around him stank of piss and sweat. He knew his wrists were bound and the floor beneath him was cold and hard. He'd been stripped down to just trousers, boots and shirt. Everything had been taken, even his bandana. His legs throbbed painfully as he painfully rolled to the side. He squinted through the haze, trying to get a better idea of his surroundings. There was loose straw tossed over the stone floor. As his vision focused, he realized the crisscrossing shapes in front of him were actually bars to his cell. Near the ceiling was a small window with the orange glow of sunset peeking through the bars. He closed his eyes, letting his head rest against the floor with a sigh, trying to relieve the immense pain pulsing through his neck. Jail! He should have known. And he'd been out cold all day. He licked his dry lips, wishing he had some water. The small movement made him wince, his jaw and throat feeling as if they were filled with needles. Prime Ilbrin had done some damage to him, and he wondered if he could still talk. But it really didn't matter. Captain Ragfear would never believe anything he said anyway. That was his whole deal. It was no secret he got some sort of sick, twisted pleasure out of torturing people. The only thing Nox could be thankful for was the time limit Prime Ilbrin had placed on him. 2 days. That's all he had left to live. And since he managed to be unconscious for most of the day, he really only had 1.5 left. Nox shuddered, knowing the next several hours were going to be the worst of his life. There was a small glimmer of hope though. Thankfully, he'd managed to get arrested outside of Cald. Nobody knew who he was inside the city. He'd made sure to keep it that way. Working by himself for years and keeping to the shadows had brought him some privacy. It was a small comfort that he was thankful for, but he was thankful for it. Abby would take care of his mother, and he had no doubt about that, although he felt bad for the extra work placed on her shoulders. Even if his mother didn't get her medicine, she could at least live out the rest of her days in peace. It was still a broken promise, but it was all the light he had left to cling to. He'd already failed Zeuk, who is not dead, I refuse to believe it. And the grief of losing the fox was nearly enough to crush him. Nox felt tears streaming down his face as he cursed under his breath, his throat twitching in pain. After all the pain and trauma he'd gone through in the Hollow, that's what the forbidden dungeony thing was called. It was the Hollow. It turned out it was all for nothing. The eyes, the clavis, the dreams. It had been so overwhelming and so impossible to deal with. Even after all his attempts to escape, it seemed fate had intervened and destined him for failure. He never wanted any part of those things. All he'd ever wanted was to feed himself, save his mother, a seemingly simple task. He should have known the world would bite him in the ass. That was the only thing Licorice did for anyone, especially those of his lineage shunned by King Lidari. Despite his best intentions, the world's problems had found him, and he was going to pay the price. The sound of boots against stone roused Nox from his spiraling thoughts, making him look up. Keys rattled against the bars as the guards opened the lock, pulling the door open for a familiar man wearing a red cloak. "Ah, you're awake! Way to spoil my fun." Captain Ragnar smiled maliciously, walking into his cell carrying a rolled up piece of leather. It's always better to wake them up with a nice slice across the face. Really gets people in the mood to talk. Nox watched through the fog as the two guards came in and dumped a bucket of cold, stale water in his face, shocking him back to his senses. He was forcefully lifted to his feet, his arms nearly pulled out of their sockets. A chair was brought in to the centre of the room where he was sat, his arms and legs untied, then rebound to the chair itself. Ragnar slowly removed his cloak and overshirt, handing them to one of the guards. He rolled out the leather on the small cot in the corner, exposing all the highly polished metal instruments that were inside. Oh! It's like every movie ever with a torturer guy. My, a half-elven man living here in Cald all this time. Right under my nose, Ragnar commented. I really thought I'd cleaned up most of your kind. But a few slipped through, I guess. Though, judging by your scars, I'd say you're not overly fond of your lineage either. We have that in common. Ragnar paused a moment, looking over him. You know what? I'll make this easy for you, Ragnar said, calmly letting his fingers trail over the tools. Just hand over the ring, and we'll let you go. Plain and simple. Nox struggled against his bonds, which only made the captain smile. Oh no, he said in a mocking tone. Oh no, it will. Looks like you can't take the ring off. He plucked a small blade, no longer than a finger, from the roll and walked over. Go ahead. Try again. I can't Nox screamed as the blade was plunged into his thigh. Pain rocketed through his body as he felt the tip of the knife strike bone. His leg began to quiver, trying to get away from the pain, but he was bound too tightly. I didn't give you permission to speak, Ragnar growled, a wicked smile on his lips as he watched the blood flow from the wounds and trickle down Nox's trousers. He tore the knife back out, and Nox cried again. This is not the correct expression for this. But you know what is? Now, since you've decided to be uncooperative, I guess we'll have to do this the hard way. You piece of... Nox was cut off as Ragnar struck him across the face. A metallic tang filled his mouth as he realized he'd bitten his tongue. With a scowl, he glared up at Ragnar and spit in his direction, blood splattering across the captain's clean shirt. Instead of retaliating like Nox expected, he merely laughed. His reaction filled him with fury as blood ran down his lip and chin, dripping onto his shirt. My, you are a tough one. But I guess you'd have to be to survive this long. The captain chuckled, crouching down in front of Nox. He lifted a thumb up and wiped away the dripping blood dripping from Nox's chin. I haven't had one of you in a while. Nox watched as he licked the blood from his thumb, letting out a soft moan. Jesus! Letting out a soft moan that made his skin crawl. Ragnar wasn't just a psychotic monster, he was a psychotic. I just spread that loose. Ragnar wasn't just a monster, he was psychotic. The captain leaned in closer, putting his lips nearly on Nox's ear, the hot breath against his neck. I'm going to have so much fun with you. Oh good lord, even I feel gross after it. Don't make me Nox. Warning, torture scene. Two hours later, Nox felt a cold splash of water as he awakened for the third time, having passed out from the sheer amount of pain he'd experienced. Water and blood streamed down his torn clothing and onto the floor as his vision started to return. His body was pockmarked with punctures, shallow cuts and cauterized wounds. Ragnar was an expert when it came to keeping his victims alive, knowing all the right places to cut so that they experienced the worst pain imaginable without fear of them dying on the spot. There were many times over in the past 2 hours that Nox wished he could force himself to die. Every time he passed out, he hoped it would be the last, wanting the dark void to take him away forever. But there he was again, wet, cold, and in so much pain he could hardly think. Let's see if you're ready to tell us the truth. Ragnar cooed again, leaning against the bars of the cell while he flipped a knife into the air and caught it again. Where did you find that ring? I told you. Nox wheezed, his head hanging towards the floor as water streamed off his hair. I found it in the hollow, in the Forbidden Ruins west of here. It called to me. You expect me to believe that you found it a few days ago. Now you have full access to its power, enough to attack Prime Ilban and catch him off guard? Ragnar scoffed. Nobody can best the primes, especially a nobody like you. I didn't do that, Nox sighed, shaking his head. It does that by itself. Liar! Ragnar yelled, walking across the room and slashing Nox across the chest with his knife. Nox didn't cry out. He merely gritted his teeth, the pain of a new cut minuscule compared to all the other wounds across his body. He felt tears welling up in his eyes. I'm not lying, and that's a new tab. He sobbed. I didn't even want it. Take it from me, please. You. Ragnar called to one of the guards outside the cell. Come here and take this ring from the prisoner. But Captain, the man stammered. Do as you're told, or you'll be next. Ragnar snarled, brandishing the knife at the guard. The guard crossed the room and knelt down next to Nox, a nervous look on his face. Yes, you should be nervous. Two others had gone before him, both succumbing to the same fate as Prime Ilbaran when he tried to remove the ring by force. Nox looked up at him, pleading silently for help. With a terrified expression on his face, the guard reached forward and wrapped his fingers around the ring. And as usual, a deafening boom filled the air as he was blown backwards, lightning arcing over his body and through the cell. To Nox's surprise, he watched as the lightning didn't take effect like before. Instead, it lifted off the guard's body and redirected itself, jumping across the room to Ragnar and curling across his chest and arms. He screamed out in pain, collapsing to the ground, his limbs twitching from the sudden shock of electricity. The guard seemed almost untouched, while the energy continued to crackle over the captain's body, finding any exposed piece of flesh to electrocute. Nox felt a horror wash over him as he realized the ring was now targeting the person causing him pain, which would only make things much worse. A long moment passed before the captain was able to pull himself back to his feet. The exposed skin on his arms was blackened by the shock, blood oozing from the lightning-shaped cuts and burns crawling over his skin. Smoke rose from his clothing and hair as he turned his attention to Nox again. Oh, good lord, here we go. That, he breathed heavily, was a foolish mistake. I bring them in, the captain called, cutting him off. From down the hall, Nox heard scuffling and feminine voices crying out in pain. Oh no! Oh no! He watched as two figures were dragged into his cell and forced to the ground on their knees, both with their hoods over their heads. The captain pulled himself up straight and walked over, leaning down between them. Remember, it's your fault that this happened. Prime Ilbran is on a schedule. With a sneer, he ripped the hoods off the figures. Nox felt his heart stop beating. In front of him kneeled Abby, with a black eye and blood streaming from her nose. To her, Next to her, coughing and spluttering from exertion, was his mother. "I'm sorry, Knox," Abby cried, tears streaming down her face. They were going to hurt Kaya." "Shut the fuck up, bitch," Ragvir hissed, backhanding her across the face with all his strength. "Speak again and I'll make sure your whole family ends up in the ground." Abby's body shook with sobs as she looked up at Knox. He gave her the most forgiving look he could muster, between the pain and fear racking his body. His gaze then turned to his mother, who was less beat up, but pale and considerably sicker than when he left. There was already blood on her lips from the coughing. He wanted to cry out, to say he was sorry, but he knew it would only bring them more pain. "You have a simple choice to make," Ragvir said, making his way back to the cot to grab a new knife, ignoring the blood dripping down his arm from his wounds. "The ring, or their lives." Ragvir walked over to Knox and cut his left arm free from the chair. Blood rushed back into his hand, making it feel like thousands of needles were pressing into his skin. He stared at his mother, wondering what she must think of him. How she must hate him for the fate he'd brought down upon them all. Taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes, knowing he only had one chance to save them. Taking the ring in his right hand, he concentrated, pleading in his mind for it to let go. That he and everything he loved would be dead if he didn't. Praying with every fibre of his being, he pulled against the metal band. It didn't move. The captain clicked his tongue. My. That's too bad, isn't it? He started walking back with the two women kneeling on the floor. "No, please," Knox begged. Ragvir placed the blade on Abby's throat, her eyes bulging in fear. She was sobbing uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face. No. The sobs were cut off as Ragvir slashed the blade across her neck, slicing through her windpipe. Her eyes widened as she stared at Knox, the life draining from them in seconds, as blood spilled across her body. With a dull thud, she hit the ground. Knox stared at her unblinking face as the last single tear traced across her cheek. Thick blood pooling around her body. He couldn't breathe. The world around him pulsed as his heart pounded in his ears. It didn't seem real. The captain moved over to his mother, the bloody blade pressed to her neck. Last chance. Knox couldn't speak. He could only stare as her sad eyes fell on him, not understanding what was going on, or why it was all happening. Too slow. No! Knox yelled, but it was too late. The blade flashed through the air and dark crimson spilled over his mother's white shirt. The guard let go of her as she swayed for a moment, locking eyes with him. She reached out a hand, leaned forward, and fell to the ground. Blood pooled around her, mixing with dirt, hair, and straw. she was dead. No, 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 Nox repeated, staring down at her. His mind is reeling. All the pain in his body melted away and was replaced with nothing but horror, disbelief, and rage. This couldn't be how it ended. Not after all the work he'd done to protect her. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. Hopefully that teaches you a valuable lesson, Ragvir said, puffing his knife to the ground. He gestured over to one of the guards. Get this trash out of here and tie him back up. I have dinner to get to. You monster, Nox whispered. You fucking monster! He struggled against the bindings, reaching out with his free arm and latching onto Ragvir's belt. The captain laughed as he grabbed Nox by the wrists, twisting it back so hard that the bones snapped. Nox screamed in pain, but kept his eyes locked on Ragvir. Nothing but pure fury running through his veins. You're right, he whispered, leaning down close to his ear, and I loved every moment of it. Nox wrenched his jaw to the side and bit down on Ragvir's ear, his incisors cutting through the flesh and easily tearing it away. The taste of blood filled Nox's mouth as Ragvir screamed and pulled away, clapping his hand to his ear. He spat the earlobe out onto the ground, smiling as the crimson ran down his chin. The guards rushed in and lashed Nox's back to the chair. You're the first that's ever wounded me. You're the first that's ever wounded me, Ragvir said calmly, a moment later staring at his bloody hand. Prime Ilban will leave with the ring tomorrow evening, but you'll remain with me. He fixed his eyes on Nox. You don't need your hand for my pleasure to continue. I'll fucking kill you, Nox hissed through bloody, gritted teeth. You and anything you've ever cared about. Just you wait. Ragvir didn't respond. He only smiled as he turned and exited the cell. I'll fucking kill you! Nox screamed after him. Well. Oh my god. That is my summary of the chapter. Yeah. That is all. That is all I have to say, okay? Holy duck. Holy poop on a stick. I just, what? Murder. There has been 2 murders. Although, I do feel that Ragvir was a bit of an idiot killing both of them at the same time. Like, he could have killed one of them and then kept the other as leverage. I don't see why he murdered both of them then. I think that's very silly of him. I think Nox will resist him now more than ever because of that. But then I guess that's what he wants. He could have just, like, chopped off Nox's finger or whole hand if he wanted to right at the start. But he didn't want that. He wanted to just keep it going forever and ever and ever and ever. He wants to just torture until he dies, because that's how he gets off, apparently. Ugh. The literal worst character award goes to Ragvia. Alright, how many chapters have we got left? 1, 2, we have 3 chapters left! I suspect the last couple of chapters might be quite long, though. I mean, it's 9. As horrible as that was, I'm tempted to finish here. I know it's a little shorter stream, but I'd like to have like an actual finale stream for this. I don't want to finish it today and leaving like 8% for like another stream, I think is the best way to go. So we're not going to read any more of this today. How about I treat you to a short story for the last 20 minutes or so? Yeah, I think I'll do that. Let me go find something for you. We can get some. It's really dark though. And where's Jack? Where is this dog? Zook needs to come save him, okay? That's how the story's gonna end. It's not like it's been sad the entire fucking time or anything. Let's have a look. What we got? Safe Room Sentinel is too long. I've read that one on stream already. I don't have many bloody stories left. Oh no. Oh no. I don't have many short stories left that I haven't already read. Oh, I know. This one's going to be a bit weird to read, okay? I need like lots of voices for this one. But it should be a giggle. I don't know how well edited this is either, for the record. It should be okay. Because I mean, I did put it on Patreon. Let me just get a word on the go. Heck yeah. I did lie. I do have some snuffles. Yeah! So this one is called A Cursed Town. Let's make the text nice and big for you. I won't explain what it's about. We'll have fun reading it together. Let me just change my current reading to... Oh no, if I read this, then this becomes my 10th book! No, I wanted to save that for Exodia. No. Oh well. Oh well. Exodium will just have to become 11th, okay? Cursed Tune. By me. Let's have fun. Okie dokie. Order! Order! The gavel slammed down, but the panicked crowd of stupid townspeople smushed into the courthouse continued their exclamations. There it is again! The bulbous ladies screamed. It called us stupid and my wife fat, said the man with rotting food still in his beard. Now it had been said, the man flushed and red as a maiden, and pulled out a dirty hanky to clear out his beard. He's not completely successful, and now turns to his wife, who assures him I'm lying, but I'm not. I can see a bit of apple rotting away in there. That's probably why he smells bad. Shut up, foul demon! The mayor bravely challenged me in a desperate attempt to calm the masses, and the masses seemed to believe him for a moment, until I tell them about the shaking of his knees behind the podium. He is just as powerless as the rest of you in this situation, you know. He just sits somewhere different in the hall. I am not shaking, he growls, lying. Gritting his teeth in a growl, he looks around for me, but I am beyond his senses. A farm boy at the back. A farm boy at the... I told you I wasn't sure at the editing, so a farm boy at that jumps to his feet, tattered hat to his chest. Are you God? Poppycock! The old vicar also jumps to his feet, so insulted by the notion that I thought he would rocket through the roof at the force which he just stood. God would not insult as such, he insisted, but the Bible did say something about God's wrath, no? Did the old minister turn a blind eye to God's tough love? No, he snapped, determined. You are a demon, a devil, summoned by the witch we slew. It means vengeance, the bulbous woman crowed. Her eyes sparkled with insecure tears at being called bulbous, because facts were facts. Maybe the woman should control the portion sizes of her own cooking. You see? The vicar seemed to take that as evidence that I was not, in fact, God, but some mean spirit. Then what do we do? How do we get rid of it? Asked the old farmer, seemingly the only one in the room with an iota of intelligence. He smiled at the compliment. See, I can be nice. The vicar scrunched up his nose so much he aged his face by 100 years. He unscrunched quickly, proving that even a man of God is shallow about his appearance. He cleared his throat, about to do his boomy, annoying, preachy voice. He hesitated on it. No idea why. Then, we must pray, he declared, something useless. Some of you are clearly not praying properly. He blamed everyone else, as usual. I will hold a prayer ceremony at the church tomorrow. We will pray to God that he sends an angel to smite this demon and free us from this torment. The entire town will be purified by holy water and incense. The only good thing about what he said was spraying the whole town with water and nice smelling smoke. It would definitely improve the smell of piss, sweat and feces in the room. Very well, the mayor agreed, because really what else can he do? Everyone report to the church at first light tomorrow. At first light, the town of Stupid did as told, like the good little sheep they were at the church. Oh no, it's back, the woman whined. Concentrate on your praying, the vicar snapped. The pews were lined with them. Tall, short, thick, thin, all with hands together and eyes closed in reverence to an imaginary being that didn't exist. I mean, they can at least hear me, but no, they'll look at some strange man in the clouds. Some winced at my musings and others growled. I like it when they don't talk. I just get to talk. I get to tell them how the bulbous woman was sleeping with the mayor. What? Her gross husband shot from his seat and glared at her. It's obviously lying, the vicar snapped. But I wasn't. The fact that Miss Bulbous didn't even seem shocked is evidence, wouldn't you think? She didn't have an immediate reaction like her husband. Wicked demon, stop this! She broke out of her praying also and glared around the room, eventually landing her eyes on her husband. You mustn't believe it, dear. I was simply attempting to keep up my prayer. Please do not be tempted to wrath by its words. She lied to his face and tried to make me out as the bad guy. But then everyone here is pretty good at that. I'm glad that Mr. Grossbeard didn't seem entirely convinced, but like a good sheep, he turned to praying with his wife. It got quiet and boring. The incense at least smelled nice. I was right when I thought this was probably the nicest the town has ever smelled. Oh no! An angel! There were pricks of excitement in the townspeople. Ah! A flaming sword! Oh no! Whatever should I do? Oh no, you should be careful where you swing that, Mr. Angel. You might set the church on fire! Almost as if it was timed, the townspeople started to smell a rather more suffocating brand of smoke. Fire! The farmer with a brain cell called out and started scuttling away. The crowd started screaming and ran after, but the vicar tried to call them back. Don't stop! We nearly have it! God will protect us! He ranted and raved, but God didn't protect the easily set alight wood of the church. On a hot and clear day such as this, the fire spread fast. Many of the townspeople made it out, but the stubborn vicar was trapped by a falling beam. Some of the more foolhardy of the town tried to save him, but had to leave to save their own skin. The stubborn vicar burned with his church. The town stared in disbelief. Could it be that God had forsaken them? That the angel had meant to strike down their church? And that the vicar had been a demon leading them astray? The true target? They would never know. However, the voice they all heard bid them farewell. Please be careful about what you believe in the future. The witch undid her invisibility spell. Then she entered the forest, glancing back and smirking at the flaming inferno of her revenge. The end. So this story came from a Reddit post about let me see if I can find it. So let's see if I can find it. I've got a link to it. Continue. Let me just... This was it. This is the very specific Reddit prompt that I used. An invisible man enjoys acting as the disembodied narrator voice that pesters most of the townsfolk. So I thought, yeah, witch out for revenge. And that was the idea I came up with for this. It was fun. I really enjoyed writing that one, and I actually think it read not that badly. I thought it's something that in my head would work really well as in audio, but I didn't think I could pull it off. But I don't think I did a bad job reading that, actually. But you know what that means? That means we get a... This is my 10th book, technically. Short stories count, this is one. Heck yeah. That was The Cursed Town by me. $80! 9,980. Heck yeah, we're kicking this number thing's butt. However, I think this is it for today. It's a bit of a shorter one, but I had fun. And I look for... So next Sunday will be the finale of this book then, because we have 8% left. We've gone through more than that today, so I'm going to have to make sure I've got something else prepped maybe to fill in some time, or we could just spend the entire time talking about the Exordium, because I have a feeling we can do some lovely theory crafting at the end of this for the second book. And then I can tell you in the review for the second book when it's done. So that's it for the day. Yes, I wanted to talk about my schedule for next week or so. Speaking of which, I haven't changed up my ending screen at the moment. I forgot to do that. I can do that while I talk. Multitasking, bro. Anyway, so as people already probably know, next week, a little known game called Sonic Forces, that's been out for ages. Sonic Frontiers comes out. And I have something of a schedule down so that I can play it as soon as I can. But my problem is that I'm not sure whether I can pre-install it or not. Which is a giant pain in the butt, really. Because I want to play it as soon as physically possible. But I might not be able to. Because if I can't pre-install it, I go on UK time. Which means I won't be able to install it till the evening, which is when I can stream. So I won't have it ready to stream, which is a giant pain in the ass. But yes, I can multitask. What are you on about? However, if I can pre-install it, I will play it on the Tuesday when it comes out. If I can't, then it will have to wait till Thursday, which isn't a normal streaming day for me. Normally, because I do go to the gym that day. Yes, I'm allowed to go out of the library for physical health. 4 is really nice, actually. This imprisonment isn't the worst, but I have missed out on a few things because of it. However. Yeah, so I would love to play it on the day it comes out, but that really depends on whether I can pre-download it. If I can't pre-download it, I will be playing it Thursday, but because of how my life is at that time, I don't know what time specifically I will be able to play it. So it will be somewhere after 8. I don't know what time after 8. And after that, I plan on gorilla-ing Sonic a lot. Like, I love Sonic. I love it. And I'm gonna want to sweat the shit out for that game. So I will basically be playing it whenever I have free time. So I can't say when that will be. But every time I will go to play it, I will be pressing my go live button so I can do it on stream, so we can have fresh reactions, etc, etc. That's my plan. So expect a few more streams. I mean, schedule-wise, I can give you a vague idea of when these might be, because we're probably looking at the Thursday evening for maybe an hour or so. Then I can't Friday, I'm busy. Then I can't. Might be able to Saturday, might be able to do Sunday. Then we're probably looking at Monday, Tuesday, then Thursday again. Basically can't do Wednesday and Friday. Basically. Any other day just depends on what I'm doing for that day. I might still try squeezing some Final Fantasy, and Sunday will always be for books. There is no other alternative to that. This channel is primarily about reading and books, so Storytime Sunday is very important to me, and I will be keeping that as is. But I think that's about it. I think that's about all I can rant to you about. I'll probably do something similar to Pokemon. I haven't quite figured out how I'm streaming Pokemon yet, but I know there's I think it's a Shadowcast you can use to plug in your Switch and the stream from that. So I'll be looking into that, I think, the next few weeks, because I would very much like to stream Pokemon as well. I think that would be fun. But I'm not as eager to get my first reactions on that one, because Pokemon can be quite organic, question mark, because obviously you find different things, lucky finds, and whether you can catch, whether you can decide to do different Pokemon, stuff like that. So yeah, also with this whole 3 split narrative thing that they're doing, I could like have a stream profile where I focus on going on a different path than maybe I do in my main game. That would be fun. But that's for later on in November. By later on, I mean like 2 weeks away. These games are so close. But yeah, I probably wouldn't touch on stream until I finish. Maybe. I don't know. There's so many games, bro. I want to play so many games. I want to quit my job and just stream all the time, okay? But I can't. Anyway. Now I'm just getting ranty. I'm gonna rant into myself in an empty library. Yeah. But either way, I will be keeping an eye on pre-downloading. I'm gonna double check it now. Hey Steam! Can I pre-download it? No. It's not telling me if I can pre-download it. I'm gonna check it on Monday. Keep an eye on my Twitter. I'll tell you if I can pre-download it or not then. If not, I will be playing Final Fantasy on Tuesday instead. Will I be streaming Monday? No! I want a nap. I'm gonna be streaming a lot after Sonic comes out, okay? So I'm gonna take that time for a break while I can. Anyway. Yeah, that's it. That's all I've got for you. Thank you very much for coming. I had fun. I hope you had fun. Look forward to next week and the finale of Exordium. I also hope you enjoyed Accursed Town. I will have the full little ready video up at some point. Thank you. Goodbye. There we go. I actually didn't fix the ending like I thought I did. Yes. I lied. I'm not very good at multitasking. Good night.